Yeah, so we've got Rhett here today, Jiu-Jitsu practitioner, former policeman.
Yes, sir.
Father, husband, Christian. Am I missing anything?
Software engineer.
Software engineer. Is that what you're currently doing?
Yeah, that's the current line of work.
How is that?
It's a very different beast from anything I've ever done before. I've always kind of done like blue collar work, so to kind of go into that space and try and do that work, it's so different in terms of production and what your day is like.
How did you get into that from this other aspect?
Yeah, so I've done a lot of different things. Built houses, and did sales, and did like retail and all that other stuff. And I don't know, I just kind of always tinkered with computers a little bit. I come from a family of engineers, so it was very just normal as a kid, for example, watching my dad, who was on the mechanical side of engineering, tinker, and then my grandfather was a mechanical engineer too. And so had some things happen, in my life. Had a kid very, very young. My oldest I had at 19 years old.
Okay.
So not really a direct opportunity to go to college, but then I was like, hey, I need to better myself. And so it's crazy how God kind of took me on this weird path, and that eventually became like my career as a means to.
Did you end up getting a degree in?
No.
Okay, so you're a software engineer.
Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay.
I took a textbook and a YouTube playlist, and I taught myself, and then I got blessed when I came down here with my first like corporate job.
Okay.
And I worked really, really hard and was able to convince them that I was worth the risk.
Yeah, that's crazy. So you came to Texas for that job?
Yes, I did.
And the one that you're currently in?
Yeah, I did. Well, I should say, got out of law enforcement at the time, and I was way up north in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Beautiful, but not really like a tech hub. And so I was trying to build websites for small businesses and do technical work for them. And just one day, just felt the push. I asked my wife. I said, "Hey, Austin's a tech hub. Would you ever move to Austin?" And she's like, "Absolutely." We had never been there, and I had never been to Texas, and so I actually came down here without a job.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, and so I got a job about 2 months in.
Took the leap. Came down here. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. So, how did you, out of high school, what was your path?
Yeah. So I graduated kind of, I guess 2006, and so we have, the war on terror kicking off.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
All my buddies are going, right? And so I'm in. At the time, there was a delay for DEP in our area. So what they would do, for some reason, was a lot of guys would they would have you come in and you wouldn't actually sign the paperwork right away. They were shifting to like contracts and stuff. And so I was doing that, but I hadn't signed the paperwork. Just we were just processing tons of guys.
This was Army or Navy?
Navy is what I was looking at, and ended up finding out that my girlfriend was having my oldest son at the time, and I just felt like, man, I just want, because all my buddies are either in boot or done A school or in Afghanistan, Iraq, so I'm talking to that, and then
now you got to make
a tough call.
Yeah.
And so I felt that I needed to stay, though I didn't want to stay, and it's something I had to kind of work through for a long time. Having that, I guess, that guilt in a way that my buddies went and I didn't go, and so I stayed, and because there was nothing, the recruiter hadn't finalized my stuff. They were just like, okay, see you.
Just dissolved.
Yeah, but that kind of set the tone for my life because I was just adrift at that point. That's all I had ever planned on doing. I come from like 10 generations of veterans type of thing.
Oh, wow.
So I had like no concept of how to be a new father and just live, and I'm 19 and clueless.
Okay.
At the time.
So what did you end up doing?
anything I could, right? Because now you're a dad. So I worked sales for a bit, like retail sales. I did like there's a chain. I don't know if it's nationwide. There's like a clothing chain called like Buckle. I'd like sell clothes.
Yeah, that's
like
a nationwide.
yeah, okay, yeah. I don't know. Like the affliction stuff at the time.
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
terrible at it. I was
That's awesome.
not like necessarily sales. I was like, this is not what I care about. I'm here for the family, and then got into like cell phone sales or whatever, and then I was always fixing things, and
so you've always had interest in that.
Yeah,
it's just a tinkering.
It just came that way. Yeah.
Cool. Interesting. And then how did you end up becoming a police officer?
That's a funnier story because I never even considered it or thought of. So I ended up working remotely for Apple out of the Austin branch, but up in Idaho, doing like technical support and stuff for them, and from home. And it was a grind, different time zones. I ended up supporting the UK, North America, and then Hawaii and like Australia. So I was kind of like up late, and I had these young kids and stuff like that. And my neighbor, who we were pretty good friends with, said, "Hey, you're in tech, right?" Yeah. And he says, "My brother-in-law is in tech. He just got promoted. He needs a guy. Would you be interested?" And I said, "Well, I'll talk to him, sure." And that's all they told me. So he walks in, and nice guy. He's still working there, and he says, "Hey," he said, "so it's an IT role, a lot of different hats." He goes, "It's for the police department. Do you have a problem with that?" And I said, "No, I don't have any friends who are cops. I've never been in trouble. I don't know. Just haven't had much intersection with law enforcement in my life." So I started off as their IT guy.
Interesting.
And yeah, and then got to help out and do some cool stuff. Made a lot of friends and like detectives, helping out with sort of like the technical needs, which kind of like got me interested in some other stuff. So that totally.
And then how did that progress?
How did that progress? I was trying to think of what the next thing was, and then, like I said, we talked about it a little bit earlier, alluded to that, like that guilt of like all my buddies going off, so they're not doing anything, but I have this family, right? And at this point, I'm remarried. My twins are born. I got 3 kids, type of thing. So, pointing up and doing that at that stage of my life was probably not possible. A lot of guys do it. Just for me and my family dynamic, it wasn't there. And so my wife and a couple of friends have been like, "Hey, have you ever thought about trying to put in and go for patrol?" And no, I never thought about it. And I was working on one of my buddy's cars, because I even did the car part, like a lot of their technical systems in there, and he was the SWAT sergeant. And so we're just talking smack to each other while I'm wrenching on his car, and because he's working, right? He's all suited up and everything, and he looks at me and goes, "Dude," he's like, "why don't you come to patrol?" And I looked at him, and I don't know why. He said, "I think you should do it." And then fixed his car, got in, drove off, and I went home and told my wife, and my wife just looks at me and she goes, "Put it in your packet right now." And so I did, and I went through the whole testing process. It was competitive at the time. This was pre George Floyd, pre all the BLM, the defund the police type of movements, and so it was still very competitive at that time.
What year are we talking about?
This would have been like early 2017.
Okay.
I want to say early 2017. Yeah. So got in there. Was not number 1 despite working there. I think I was like number 3.
I can't show that.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah.
And had to like redid all my polys and stuff. Like, we have to make you do it, And so redid all that, and then was this like 34-year-old guy with no military experience, no tactical experience, go into the police academy, and then COVID hit.
But all the technical.
In the police academy, I was fixing stuff.
Yeah. It doesn't go away.
Yeah. It was so funny. It was so funny during that time. Yeah.
So how long is the police academy?
So up there, I want to say traditionally, if there's not a global pandemic, it's about 6 months.
Okay.
Yeah, I had a very unique experience
I
through
bet.
there. Yeah, because we had the riots, and we were affected in the sense of, like, you know, folks wanted to protest, which is totally their right, and so that whole area was really active and stuff during that time, which infected our instructors and some other things. So it kind of expanded that timeline unexpectedly. I don't think it's ever happened since.
Yeah, okay.
So I think we were in like 9 months. Was the
Okay, that's a long time to
a
be
little
in
bit
academy.
longer. Yeah.
I guess not if you recycle, 'cause you can't get through that.
Right.
Does that happen pretty often? People recycle the academy or anything, or do they just kind of bail out and not come back?
You know, again, only being in the community for about like 4 or 5 years total, if you count my civilian time, I'd never heard of that,
Okay.
but maybe it's possible.
Gotcha.
Usually, I think the emphasis is to do well and to, you know, not be recycled. You know, and there are grounds to, you know, evolutions and things that are definitely pass fail. So,
Gotcha.
you know, pressure.
But it's made to get everybody through.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. So when I got some body armor questions now.
Okay.
So when you get through,
Mm-hmm.
and day of graduation, right?
Yeah.
And you get assigned to whatever patrol that you're on. Where are you getting your gear from? How does that work?
So for my department, we had both kind of like he was like a fleet and equipment manager, and then we had our armorers, and we had multiple armorers. So anything like tactical related, we would get from the armorers, and the rest would be like radios and stuff, with the exception of body armor. That would come from the equipment manager.
Okay.
And so he would just kind of hand it out.
But the police department gave you a set of body armor, like plate carrier wise or vest wise.
Yeah, it was a vest. We didn't have at the time, and I don't know if this has changed. We didn't have a policy for an external carrier.
Okay.
It was all just the vest on the inside.
Okay, and that
That
had
was
a
all vest.
that didn't have a hard plate.
We had a central hard plate.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. They gave us one from the front.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So you don't want to run away. Gotcha.
I mean, I never intended on running away, but I did buy a second plate and stick it in the back just in case.
Just in case, yeah.
Yeah.
It was like a sappy plate. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Exactly.
Okay, so you guys were rocking a hard plate all the time then?
I did.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
So the different police officers that I've been talking to, it was like hit or miss. Sometimes it was like the local church bought the plates for the police officers.
Oh, really?
They were not issued them at all.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I've been hearing all sorts of different things,
Yeah.
which is why I asked you.
Yeah.
But that's good to know that this is that they're at least in that state they're
Yes.
purchasing them from the police department
Yes.
and then issuing them out.
I
to
have
everybody.
I have a story if
Yeah,
I can
sure,
tell you
absolutely.
a story on that. So, this was right before I hit the streets. So the way it worked at my agency in that case was I had already been pre-selected. I had tested with them, and then they said, "Hey, we are sending you to the academy." And there's also people who can just attend the academy and then hope they get picked up if there's no gotcha. So I was in the former camp. So what that meant was when I got out, they already knew me, and they kind of had this idea of what they wanted, my strengths and weaknesses, and what they wanted to work on. And so I grew up a country boy, only shooting rifles.
Okay.
And so they identified I hadn't had a lot of pistol work, so we spent a lot of time at the range. So we're at the range, and this is right before I hit the streets, and we had to get qualled with the shotgun. And I was with the range man, and we're running like a course together with the shotguns, and one of the slugs ricocheted super hard and caught me right here, and we just stopped, and we were following the structures and everything that they had given for the training thing, but it was just fluke. And I'll never forget. His name was Steve. He looks at me and he goes, "This is why you always need to wear plates."
Yeah.
And so,
that's crazy.
So that's why they gave me one. And I was like, "Is there supposed to be two?" Like, no, you can get two, but we're going to give you one for the front. And I said, "You know what? I caught a slug and right here."
Oh boy.
So that's why I elected to do that for
you
sure.
probably needed to change that plate out too after that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not good. Holy moly.
I nearly shot myself, not in the
Somehow,
really bad
yeah,
sense somehow,
yeah.
but a ricochet.
Or a ricochet.
Yeah.
Yeah, what were you shooting at?
They had these steel silhouette plates, and then like a
flat
cone
steel?
course. Yeah, you know, it's like almost like they would set it up like almost like a USPSA course and everything like that. But here I am, you know, I'm the new guy in ignorance, so I'm assuming we're at safe distances and this isn't a problem.
I mean, I've never heard of a slug bouncing straight
I
back.
don't think he had ever even seen that bounce back.
Wow.
Yeah, but I qualified, so hey, we'll take that.
That is a W.
We will take it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy. Okay, so you get to the police department that you had been working for prior as an IT guy, and now you're a patrolman?
Yes.
Patrolman? Okay.
Yes.
And then what? Any interesting stories from that, I'm sure?
Interesting. It was a little different for me because I had those prior relationships. There was times when some of the expectations were a little bit higher.
Yeah, I bet.
Just because, not like anything malicious, but more along the lines of, hey, like, we had just spent so much time together as the shifts rotated and me working there and shifted, which was fine, and it was great. But that was okay, and that was good. And it's a really good agency that I was at. There were some great people there, and there's some good leadership, and because of that agency, that's how I got into Jiu-Jitsu as well. And
Gotcha.
is they're just super invested in combatives and being trained and safe.
What was the agency?
Coeur d'Alene Police Department.
Okay.
So it's a city agency.
City
Yeah.
agency, okay. Gotcha. Interesting. So then you got into jiu-jitsu, huh?
Yeah, I think.
So was it was directly in relation to police department work? Okay.
Yeah. So more stories, if I may. So originally, when I was there as the IT guy, he's now a captain up there, but he was a brown belt at the time. He's now a black belt. But we built up a rapport, a friendship, and he's just always preaching the jiu-jitsu thing. It's like, Rhett, you gotta try it. You gotta try it. I'm like, I'm the IT guy.
I'm the IT guy.
You know, I was like, but I always like, you know, I grew up, I had 3 brothers and stuff like that, so
You kind of got a wrestler.
yeah. So never wrestled though. My dad refused to let me. But I grew up, you know, watching like Karate Kid and stuff like that, and
Nice.
you know, I was fed a diet of like Chuck Norris and
Very nice.
Stallone and Van Damme and everything like that, you know, in that 80s era. So I'd always had like an interest in combatives, but I just watched UFC. So I'm in IT. This is before I go to patrol, and he says, "Hey, you gotta try it." I was like, "Okay, I'll go." So I go, and this is not the normal experience. So for anybody listening or anyone starting to train, don't let this dissuade you. But I go there, and I get paired up with like a 300-pound blue belt.
Nice.
And usually when you have somebody new, the idea is you don't want to crush them.
Yeah.
You want them to kind of experience it and come back and give them some things to work on, but also open their eyes to the nature of this is what fighting is really like. And it's very eye-opening. He elected to just smash me for an hour straight. And I just remember like barely being able to stand at the end of it because I'm an IT guy. I'm just out of shape and stuff.
Yeah, just totally. Especially after an hour.
Yeah,
exhausted.
And he just like I couldn't get up. I couldn't get this guy off.
So I do Murph 3 times a week. Right?
Yeah.
An exhausting workout.
Yeah.
We did what, 2 minutes the other day?
Yeah.
2 minutes twice.
Yeah.
I was exhausted.
Yes. Yes.
I was sweating all over the place.
Yes. Yes. And so to the point at which the guy going to school, who I ended up becoming friends with after getting into law enforcement and everything like that, he just gives a speech about, hey, you know, let's be welcoming a new training partner. And I clueless at the time. I later look back now, having been in jiu-jitsu for a while, and just going like, man, that guy crushed me. So I didn't go back.
Okay.
I didn't go back for months, and then up there, I think it's different here in the local area, but at that agency, the state certification combatives for police officers is through jiu-jitsu. Okay. So when I went into the police academy, I was doing jiu-jitsu 3 days a week.
Gotcha.
And got really hooked.
Nice.
Really hooked at that point. I was like, I'm getting paid to do jiu-jitsu. This is awesome, you know. And so when I was in the academy, so that kind of kick-started that
Gotcha.
whole thing.
Gotcha. So you've been doing it for like 7 years now, almost, right?
2018, off and on.
Yeah. Okay. Wow, that's a long time.
Yeah.
What belt are you?
Not a good belt. No. So that's the thing about that, and if I could say to everyone there is, I took a lot of breaks, and I'll kind of get to that, especially when I get out of, like, when I got out of law enforcement. I got hurt, took a lot of breaks, and then in moving, we had a really unique gym culture. So it ended up that black belt was actually my combatives instructor, the head combatives instructor at the police academy. His name was Derek. He unexpectedly passed away right after I'd gotten out and moved. And so we had this culture of all these, it was guys outside the community, but also a lot of like cops and everything, not just from that agency, but from other agencies around. So we just had this close-knit group, and then that's not easy to follow.
Yeah.
And so it kind of bummed me out for a long time, and I wouldn't train, and I'd just watch it on TV, and didn't feel bad about myself for not training and all that kind of stuff. So.
Yeah, I was doing jiu-jitsu back in 2006 and 2007, and then I ended up going to college, and it was like one or the other.
Exactly.
And I ended up going,
Yeah.
Because like you said, the war was a raging back then. And they were trying to give me a scholarship, but I didn't have any kids, so that was a different dilemma to choose between. Yeah. So what pushed you kind of into getting out of being a police officer?
Yeah. So all those officers that were at that agency, and just I'd say that whole geographic region worked very, very hard. I was struggling I was working graveyard, going back to bed, blown out my shoulder. I'd gone through FDO, blown out my shoulder, which is the field training program, blown out my shoulder, gone to Texas, then came back to patrol, was redoing that. I was 34 at the time, not a Christian, and things were not going well at home at that point. I'd sleep about 2 hours a night, and we'd have to get up, go to court, 2 hours of sleep, defend your actions to a defense attorney who hopefully had more sleep than I did, and then maybe try and get some sort of workout in, and then work all night and do it all over again. And we had a schedule that tried to offer for family time, but I was so disconnected from my wife. I was so disconnected from my kids. My oldest son, I remember, he participated in a jiu-jitsu tournament. I remember him winning. I remember I got off shift, jumped in the car, and I drove to central Montana because he had gone ahead with my dad. And I couldn't tell you how I got there or what his matches were to this day. Like that's how just exhausted and everything we were. And my twins were getting older then, and I was just like, I'm not physically here with my family, but I have this amazing family, and I am not seeing them at all.
Yeah, sure.
And that was tough. And it's like, what am I doing?
And then you made a choice.
And then it was a choice at that point.
I made the same choice.
The
Army, yeah. So I was deployed for 4 out of the last 5 years that I was in the Army. Whether it was, sometimes you're deployed, right, but you're just training in the training area an hour from home, but it's for 30 plus days straight. And so, even when you're home, you're still training. And it's like just crushing you, and then your kids are growing up, and you're missing all this stuff and all that. So I totally understand that choice, because I made the same choice to get out at that time.
Yeah.
So then you get back into IT, I guess, huh?
Yeah. My wife said, "What are you gonna do?" And I said, "Well, I know I can kind of program, so I'll just try and work with local businesses." Was the idea. And got a client pretty quick. It was actually a buddy at the PD who I think he did like 17 years. But I quit, and he quit, and we had no idea each other was quitting at the same time. And then he needed something for his company, and so that's what we got to start. And then so it's like, okay, the first one, and then trying to find additional clients. It's not like I said, it's kind of a more remote area as opposed to here. So finding clients was just kind of a challenge at that point. It's like, how do you, provide and sustain a family at that point? So got the wild hair to come down here. Also, the market just went absolutely bananas.
Yes, it did.
At that point in time, and so it became unaffordable for folks to really live up there. We were in a good spot. We had just bought a new home that nearly doubled in value. But like the schools were overflowing and everything like that. My son was sitting I think 4 kids to a seat. My school bus, he sent me a picture.
Oh wow.
And they don't have the funding like they do here to build new schools. So it was kind of one of those things where we were just kind of getting pushed to do something different.
So you moved to Austin because the prices were skyrocketing there.
We moved to Austin because the prices were skyrocketing, and this is exactly what I said about it's a target-rich environment for tech.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
I refused to go to San Fran.
Was this before Austin exploded, or was this kind of during it, or?
I think it was at the beginning of when it was exploding a little bit, or maybe like the middle, but we were ignorant that it was exploding. We had no idea.
Gotcha.
So anyone we had talked to, or even just in social media or what have you, we were unaware that other people had the same idea.
You're talking after COVID?
Yeah.
2021?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was a crazy time here.
Yeah.
So I moved here in 2017.
Okay.
And yeah, our house just
Yeah.
skyrocketed. And I was like, oh man, that's,
yeah,
that's
right.
pretty nice. Except I can't move anywhere else.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
But yeah, that's a great time to move here.
Mm-hmm.
One of my neighbors, they just like sold their house for like 3 times what they bought it for, and they'd only been living there for like 5 years.
Right.
So
yeah.
I don't know where they went, but they're not here anymore. Living on some island somewhere.
Yeah, probably. Someplace real warm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when did the Gracie gym open in Round Rock?
Yeah. So I initially did not start training. I was training at a different Renzo Gracie. I was going to one in like North Austin.
Okay.
But a bit of a commute, and I was having to hit the toll road, and so it was really tough. And it just wasn't working out with the schedule. I was doing this like their 6:30 a.m. class. Training at another gym. Actually, my kids still were at that gym, but my work schedule didn't align. Also, with their morning class, I was looking for something else, and I found Renzo Gracie Round Rock, which is about 20 minutes from here. And I said, you know what? I hadn't trained in a while, and I just said, I'll give it a shot. But I'm not trying to be the world champion as much as I'd like to on the inside because I'm a competitive person. I was like, I want to train here and try and get that going, because I was a big believer, and still am, that if there's a behavior I want my children to do, I have to demonstrate it. I can't be, physically unfit in front of my boys and set that standard. Just say, hey, you need to be fit and work out, and then be a slob. I can't have them go to Jiu-Jitsu and try and coach them if I don't do it. So went there and got to meet the owner, Dave, who and somehow he had essentially created a community atmosphere like I had previously, but with such a high level of jiu-jitsu that I hadn't got to experience besides going to RGA in Austin. And I was like, this is the place. So it was just a random Google search. I was just trying to figure out what was around, and called him up, and we had talked on the phone for a bit, and kind of clicked on the phone, and one thing led to the other, and that's where I've been ever since.
Yeah, for me, I mean, now it's almost a 20-year gap, 18-year gap. The level is so much higher. I mean, everything is refined. You can just tell by being in there. You know. Usually you're hauling out, old wrestling mats that somebody acquired from some old high school.
Yeah.
And so the level is so much different now. It was really nice to see that. It's like, I don't even know how to describe it. It's like the same as like computers, right? Like back then we were like using AOL messaging, and now we got AI and I can chat GPT whatever I need. It's like, so it's like the same thing in jiu-jitsu from what I see. So that's really cool.
Yeah, there's a huge evolution in it and where it's going. Obviously, I started from more of like the tactical self-defense part of it, so a lot of it was like cuffing and vehicle extractions. But the sports side still very applicable, has also evolved. And then Austin has become kind of like the center of Jiu-Jitsu in the United States. So the quality around here is high.
Yeah.
It's very high.
Yeah.
And I talk with guys who, traveled in and trained and everything like that. And they're like, whoa. And it's just because, iron sharpens iron, and that's what's going on there. So it's been wild. Yeah, there you go, exactly.
Yeah, it's from our table. Mike passes these out for all the new guys.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
just never took it off. I guess it's
Good.
been on there for a while. Yeah. So when did you join Celebration?
Yeah. So we can talk about getting saved. This all rolls into it and everything like that. So I'm moving here. We're unsaved at this point, and we had experienced, or I had experienced, just like growing up, just kind of being what people call church hurt. Interactions with Christians that don't go well and cause a lot of pain and what have you. And so and I'll explain. This is an immature viewpoint, as I said. Well, if that's the interaction, I want nothing to do with it. So nothing really is. Stayed out of church, wanted nothing to do with it. We didn't attend church. We didn't even go on holidays or anything like that. And I had an experience one night when I was in patrol that got me questioning. And it took to moving down here. And one of the worship leaders at Celebration, my wife knew his wife, and they kept inviting us. And so from that, I came on a Christmas service, and then we got saved. And then from my time in law enforcement, I got I love the idea of being all in on something. Mm-hmm. And so we went in, got plugged in with the church, did some leadership stuff, and then eventually, over time, became a small group leader. And just went all in on it.
Wow. So how does the small group leader lifestyle treat you?
I like it because it's not what people think it is. I'm not preaching at anybody. I'm there because I care about the group of folks that I'm with, and we're there just talking, sharing information, like struggling together. And maybe that's just my mentality, but that's a lot also how like Jiu-Jitsu is in a way, is you're training partners, you're struggling together, trying to improve together, and it's the same way in the small group. Some of those teachings are tough, and life can be tough, and to be able to lean on each other and struggle with each other, not feel alone, I can't put a price on that, and I think that's what it's all about. So I love small groups. I think regardless of what church anybody goes to, get involved in one. I've never talked to anybody that's said, man, I regret going to small group. I can't say that.
Yeah.
So I'm such a huge believer in it.
That's awesome. I was thinking about the trees that we were talking about. So the first time that I came to Celebration, it was young people everywhere.
Oh, okay.
And you could see like, okay, that's it's working here. Because, I've been going to church my whole life. I started up in Ohio and then was in the Army, and then kind of came down. The Army brought me down to Texas, and then we were looking for churches, and we went to a couple, and then we moved even south, close to Austin, and we just popped into Celebration one day because somebody invited us, and it was like, oh, this is what we were looking for here, because there's people our age,
right,
and the music is there, and the worship is there, and then the small groups are there, and everything, and so. I actually started going to men's group because I met somebody in the gym.
Oh, really?
Just walked up to me and was like, because we both had a weird experience in the gym. Somebody walked in and just like freaked out on somebody.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And he was like, hey, I'm in the men's group. Have you ever been there? I was like, oh, I've been going to Celebration for like 4 years. I've never even heard of men's group.
Right.
And so that's how I got involved. So it's just like a unique kind of experience. Coming there. But yeah, man, I'm plugged in, and I love Celebration Church.
Yeah, it's so good.
We'll plug them for the video as well.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to talk about, man?
You
ever think about incorporating body armor into jiu-jitsu?
Yeah, incorporating. Actually, I think it is a great training tool, especially for law enforcement. You should train with your kid on.
Oh yeah.
And
get helmet to the nose bridge. You change your technique a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's huge. That just being, like I said, just being on the range alone and then having that experience, it bums me out. Some folks don't necessarily see the value in it, but every person is so important. Like every officer and service member is so important. So wearing your body armor and making sure that you have the best you can to, God forbid you do take a round, that you can stay in the fight and then keep going, and then be comfortable fighting in your body armor is so huge.
Yeah. Do you ever get any calls where your adrenaline is already pumping, where you're getting to the scene, but then you're almost out of breath by the time you actually get there because of the adrenaline, and then you're moving to the thing? That's where you need something that, you know. That's why the thought process behind that is what sparked some of the development of my place, to get something that you can breathe in, because you got to have the oxygen to the brain to make a good decision, especially when it's in a super important decision that's quick, you know.
Right. So we had this was right, actually, I was off for, story about that type, how important that is. So I was in training, and it was the 4th of July, and what had happened was myself and several people on shift were exposed to COVID, and we had no masks or anything at the time, but so the policy was is they had to isolate us, and they couldn't let us go back out. So I was benched that night. It would have been the end of my shift, and so 4th of July in that area is right off a lake, and so they shoot fireworks in the air, and everyone comes around across straight lines and what have you. So we would have been on a foot patrol zone is where I would have been assigned, and it ends up happening. A shooting kicks off right there in a crowd of people, and so a bunch of guys, some of my friends, they're running to get in there, and you know eventually the shooting goes down. But a lot of those guys were full on sprinting, full kit, right?
Yeah, it happens.
And full kit, and then by the grace of God, nobody was hurt. Everyone had angled their shots perfectly and everything like that. But just to think about, like you said, that adrenaline going up and down and trying to have that type of weapons discipline with civilians cutting across the back, you know, of your backdrop.
Yeah, and that's the other thing about practicing the way that you train is, you know, how do I breathe while I'm doing this? But also, shooting with plate is different than shooting without. I mean, it's literally pushing on your tucked elbows and everything. So, you know, not having that experience under pressure and everything too, and out of breath and running before, it's huge. Absolutely. I mean, I don't know if you've been to the gun range lately, but here in Texas, you can go over to the gun range and you'll see somebody not able to hit a target that is 7 meters away with a $4,000 pistol. I see it all the time. It's
like a full staccato.
Yeah.
Glistening, brand new, and you can't hit the broadside of the barn.
I mean, it's bad. It's real bad. So I can only imagine how after sprinting, you know, 100, 200 meters, in an adrenaline condition, your hands are shaking, you're tired, and then you got civilians moving around. Yeah. Now you're making decisions quick.
Yeah.
It's terrifying.
I mean, like you said, train how you fight. That's one thing I thought my particular agency did well, is that if you were on the range, you were wearing your plates.
Yeah.
That was just kind of the expectation. And they did do a good job about sprints, burpees, and then we're going to run the course like that.
Nice.
And so, no, I know not every agency is that way, and we were blessed. We had a great chief who, he's a Marine, so he really believed in weapons proficiency and like that, so he really leaned into that and supported the guys. So we had the time and the rounds, and then the range staff to think through these things, and kind of put us through all of that. And so I was proud to say my weapons proficiency went real high. That's good. Because it took the
time,
hard work,
the effort, and the funding, and all that stuff takes petitioning and getting, you know, the whole city council, the whole group behind you.
Yeah. Bullets are not cheap.
Thing.
Bullets are not cheap.
Not.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially now.
Yeah. So we were blessed in that regard, but absolutely, train how you fight, and then doing combatives with plates on. because we can't we're not always going to be up on our tools, right?
Yeah.
And especially in an urban setting and use of force continuum and everything like that. Not everything, and they taught us really well.
Yeah.
Even me, barely being in it for like 5 minutes or what have you, whatever you want to say about it, having the comfortability and the skills where I'm not necessarily going to go with this tool. I'm going to use other things. I'm going to use open hand. I'm going to use Jiu-Jitsu. I'm just going to try and restrain and immobilize. But I have 25, 30 pounds of kit on.
Yeah.
And I was carrying extra mag, so it was a little heavier. I had an early instructor who was a recon Marine, and he was super tall guy, and just a stud. And he was like, never go low on bullet. Like he was just like, you better always like if you're working with me. And so I think he was kind of using me as an ammo mule, maybe a little bit, like in hindsight. I don't know. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but no, he was just to manage that weight. We're used to that. Like you said, you run for 200 meters, and then now what happens if you got to fight somebody bigger than you?
Yeah, always bring friends.
Right. We used to call it the pig pile. The pig pile is when you pile on. But we found that Jiu-Jitsu is much more effective.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Especially if there's more than one of them.
Absolutely. We had a street there called Sherman Avenue. It was like our 6th Street, much smaller and not near as cool. But it got rowdy every night, and especially during COVID because we weren't closed. So everyone would pour over the border up in northern Idaho and then party up. So got your plate on, you got your gear, you're walking around, and then just boom, lights on in front of you. That's how it was. So
tossing people. Huh?
Taking people to jail, unfortunately, just to cool off, So.
All right. You got anything else you want to talk about?
No. I mean,
any other local plugs?
Local plugs. I'd like to spoke out. I'm leading a small group that obviously you've attended for Bibles and Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah.
We're just trying to bring the two communities together, and whether people have trained Jiu-Jitsu before or not, and whether people have read the Bible before or not, it doesn't matter. Everybody's welcome here with us, and it's totally free. So we've been blessed in that regard. We just want to share that and bring people together of all walks of life. And then also Celebration Church, small group leader there. I'd love to have any men come join us, especially. There's some women's small group. I don't lead those. But, come on up.
All right. Well, thanks for coming.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Pretty painless.
Yes.